Well, everyone, welcome to the Tennis and Bagels podcast. I'm your host, Vansh, and you guys know this by now. This is a familiar tradition that we do after every slam, and we have the one and only Steve Flink, Hall of Famer, historian. It's always a pleasure to talk to him, especially, the week following the slam. There's so many memories that we can talk about, so many wonderful moments. This time we had a new Grand Slam winner in Madison Keys, and we had Jannik Sinner winning his third major, three of the last five hardcourt majors, Steve.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. Sinner defending his crown was a highlight, but I must say, I agree with you that when we look back on this fortnight, that the real star and the person who stole the tournament in the best possible way was Madison Keys. There's no, I mean, Sinner obviously was not a shock, and it was a reaffirmation of his greatness, but in her case, she stunned a lot of people with her string of great victories, especially the two at the end against Swiatek and of course the two-time defending champion Sabalenka. So this was she was a joy to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And she had some momentum coming in, having winning the title in Adelaide. She beat
Yep.
Pagula there. She had some close, hard-fought three setters.
But yeah, I want to bring up. I want to say to the viewers that I enjoyed. I'm not a big ex Twitter guy, but I go on and I look at things. I don't like to post much, but I enjoyed very much seeing a little exchange between you and Pagula, all related to, of course, she had told Renee Stubbs that coming off that 3-set loss she had to Maddie, that if she played like she did in the third set of that final, she was going to win this tournament. And Renee brought it up on the air and said she got a follow-up text from Stubbs the day of the final, I guess, saying, "I told you so." So I thought that was fascinating because, I mean, she obviously saw something. Normally that wouldn't happen when, you have the pride that Pagula does, Bonch, and you were hoping to win the tournament yourself. You were in the finals of the last major yourself, losing a very good match yourself to Sabalenka. So for Pagula to be able to look beyond her own aspirations and move past that and analyze Keys that well, I think it's highly unusual. I commend her for it.
Yeah, absolutely. She definitely saw something playing her in that third set and, felt like, yeah, she could actually take it all the way. I mean, we've seen this in the past from her where she's won a title the week before a major and, she's always on her list of like, maybe this could happen for her. Maybe 2 weeks she could actually do it. We've seen her do like five matches in a row. We've seen her make a final 7.5 years ago, but there were so many factors, I guess, that, propelled her to like coming through at the end against the world number one and two. There's so
Let me
many
ask you
reasons.
something, though, Blanche. Sorry to jump in because I don't want to forget this. I don't know if you got a chance to see that 2017 final she played against Sloane Stevens.
Yeah, she was hurt in that match.
She was definitely, oh, listen, I think if it had been any other tournament, it was not a major, she defaults the final because her mobility was so restricted in that match. And Sloane, to her credit, exploited it to the hilt. She was playing her friend, but she knew what she had to do to get the job done quickly and efficiently. But that was not the real. I mean, listen, she could have lost to Sloane, of course,
Yep.
but not by that lopsided margin, winning 3 games in 2 sets. And I feel like people forget that it's so long ago. As you said, it's 7.5 years. So people just look at the result and figure, well, that was the history of Madison Keys. But in that instance, I felt going in, it was probably almost a 50-50 call going into that match, but we didn't see the real Keys on that occasion.
Yeah, of course. In the other pivotal moment, the four that she was always talking about across the 2 weeks, or reporters were bringing it up, was the semifinal loss in 2023 against Sabalenka, where she led by 6-love and 5-3, and she kind of feels like she left the court that day, not playing the right kind of brand of tennis in the big moments, which is just let it go for it, and then have no regrets. Because even if you lose, you play the right way, which is going big and going after your shots.
Well, but also you're right, absolutely right. But the other part of it, Bonch, is that I loved her comment about how she had sort of had this conversation with herself, where she was basically saying, you, if you don't win a major, basically saying if you don't win, if she didn't win a major, she could accept it. She wouldn't have to feel like a failure. And I think that would, I contrast that, and we'll get to him later, with, say, Sasha Zverev, who I think is really feeling the effects of losing now 3 major finals and putting tremendous pressure on himself. And as a result, maybe not performing quite as well as he would like. In her case, I think it may have been one of the real uh, key factors in her eventual triumph, is that she decided she was going to go easier on herself, but it didn't mean she didn't try hard. Didn't mean she didn't play great tennis. Didn't mean she didn't push herself, but at least there wasn't that nagging thing in the back of her mind. What if I don't win this? It was more like, I'm going to try my best, and whatever happens, happens. And I hope she maintains this, sustains that attitude going forward, because I think she's fully capable of winning one, maybe two more, but certainly winning. You could see her in this form winning another major for sure.
Yeah, I thought that was really powerful how she was talking about how like she doesn't need to win it, she still wants to win it, but she can feel fulfilled with her career even without one. And obviously, it came together for her. I mean, I honestly, Steve, I'm not sure which match was more impressive for me. The Swiatek semifinal where she saved a match point
Yeah.
and ends up winning all the time she was behind in the breaker in the final set, and the way she also won the Sabalenka match in the final. I'll always
Right.
remember
It's like a
all
dead.
five hole.
Yeah, it's like a dead heat. I agree with you. It's very hard to make a distinction. They were equally impressive. They each went right down to the wire. The difference being that Swiatek match, yes, she had to save the match point and made a great return to serve, fended off a difficult serve that was kind of into her body and hit a deep return down the middle. So good that Swiatek had to kind of do the deep knee bend and see if she could try to get the two-hander back in play, unable to do so. And then that was just an amazing tiebreak. I thought that to me was actually one of the highlights of the whole tournament. That tiebreak, the way she kept coming back in the match tiebreak from 3-1 down, 4-2 down, 5-3, 6-4, 7-5, constantly not allowing Swiatek to get that 3-point lead that might have been fatal, and kept coming back at her to the point where, and then even from 7-8, to be serving at 7-8 with no margin for error and hit an ace out wide, and then a service winner sliced serve wide in the deuce court that Swiatek couldn't get back into play on the forehand return, was just magnificent. And then, of course, Iga made an error on match point. But I would say what was, to me, what struck me, Vansh, is that both Swiatek and Sabalenka were in pretty decent form. I know that Sabalenka didn't start the final quite the way she wanted, and she had a couple of doubles in her opening service game, and she was fighting herself a bit on her way to a 1-5 deficit in the first set. But then by the end of that set, having taken two games in a row and closed the gap to 5-3, you could see how that carried her through a very impressive second set, which she won pretty decisively. And then still, Madison able to hold serve all the way through that final set until she got the break with Sabalenka serving at 5-6. So I just feel like that's what made it impressive. It wasn't like a nervous, uncertain Iga who was playing badly and you beat her 3-4, and a lot of it has to do with Iga having a bad day. And it wasn't the Sabalenka that we've seen in the past who's self-destructive and beating herself. I really felt like Keys won both of those matches, and that's what impressed me the most. She didn't get a lot of help from either one of them, but she's the one who in the end came through in the clutch, and she'll never forget it. But I hope she also uses it, Botch, as a springboard toward more. Doesn't mean, she should be expected to be in the latter stages of every major, but she should have some more chances. There should be more opportunities ahead for her to, I don't think she has to validate this, but for her to back it up.
Yeah, and we've seen her make a deep run even at Roland Garros where she's made the semifinals. Wimbledon, I feel like last year was a good opportunity against Paulini, but she got hurt in that match, and that was a bit unfortunate. So
Yeah.
I feel like she's capable of giving herself shots at all of them. So I'd like
Yeah,
to see it.
absolutely. No, I mean, look, she can threaten anywhere. She's good on all the surfaces. I feel like her best opportunity this year could well be the U.S. Open. We'll see. I agree with you. She'll be a threat at Roland Garros, and with her serve, she can do very well at Wimbledon. But I have a feeling with the American crowds and back on the hard courts again, which I still feel is her best surface, that may be where she makes another strong bid. Be a lot of fun to watch her.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was impressed by Sabalenka as well in that match because, she used a lot of variety to win that second set, and she had to really problem solve. And, I feel like that level of tennis gets it done most days. Even deep in the third as well, and yeah, I mean, both Iga and Aryna in their press conferences afterwards were just like, if Maddie plays like this, there's not much we can really do to stop her. So,
Yeah, no, I agree. I was very impressed. And it's true. Sabalenka used the drop shot very effectively, and she did try to mix things up. And she had a 15-30 at 5-all that she couldn't do anything with because Maddie was just so unrelenting and bearing down so hard on serve. And it's hard to falter. And I don't think she played a terrible game at 5-6. I just think she got beaten, and I think she knows it. And I don't know, Vansh, a lot was made. I just had dinner with a friend, and he was not happy about the breaking of the racket. But I felt like, look, she came up to the net. She was very gracious at the net. She did her bending, went over to her chair, smashed the racket, put the towel over her head, and then came back out for the presentation ceremony and made some very gracious remarks there and humorous. So I felt like people shouldn't come down on her too hard for the racket, because it was a pretty agonizing loss for anybody in her shoes who's going for a third title in a row and is that close to doing it, and feels like she could have done it. But on the other hand, I think when she reflects on it, she'll realize, I didn't I didn't really, I mean, having a 15-30 at 5 all and another love 30, it's not like she squandered 5 or 6 break points. It's not like she, served a double fault on match point to lose. It was nothing like that. And I mean, like, for instance, Vanch, compare this loss to her loss to Coco at the US Open a couple of years ago. I mean, very different, because she made so many errors and she got so tight. And Coco played beautifully, but I would say her level here compared to the loss against Coco, to me, there's no comparison.
Yeah, no comparison between the two. And Aryna, there's one thing that was kind of clear to me across the 2 weeks, that she wasn't serving as well as she did, last year for sure.
Yeah.
But the ball toss is a lot higher, so I'm not sure what that's gonna look like in the future, because we did see her serving a few more doubles, not serving as fast as normal. That is definitely something I observed. But the rest of her game was super solid, and she ended up still, almost winning this thing. So
Yeah, no, you're right. The serve, she needs to iron that out, to figure that out. And because she does need more, she could use a little more help than she was getting over there. More service winners, aces, back to the speed and maybe the precision of a year ago. I agree. I get a feeling over the course of the months, by the time we get to the next slam in Roland Garros, I would hope she has that resolved.
yeah, would hope so too. And as for Iga, I mean, it was quite a good tournament for her. I mean, she didn't have the toughest draw, certainly, to the semifinals, but she was rolling over her opponents. And the moments in the semis, I feel like, from the ground, we saw her using quite a lot more defense, a lot more versatility. It was very different to her other losses in the hard court, on the non-rolling Garros slams, where you feel like, she's making some progress here. And maybe, yeah, we can see her winning another hard court slam.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. This was a step in the right direction. Again, she should walk away from that match and say, look, this was painful, but let me analyze my performance. My performance was pretty good. And she should feel like she lost it the right way, and she got beaten by a really good return on match point, and she kept building the leads in the tiebreak, but she wasn't throwing them away. Keys was coming back at her with a lot of aggression and pace. So I think she should feel like, look, okay. And Maddie backed up the win over me with another great performance against Sabalenka. So I think she comes away from it very upbeat and feeling like, yeah, she's going to play well on the faster surfaces. And then, of course, I think the carryover as well will be to make her even more confident when she gets back on clay in a few months. So she'll reap some rewards despite losing in the semi. That was not a typical, like a lot of the other losses we've seen over there. This one went right down to the wire, and she was a bit unlucky to lose it, frankly.
Well, for sure. I mean, we were talking before the tournament, and the two main favorites on the women's side were Sabalenka and Gauff, who had played so well at the United Cup, and was coming off of a really good fall. What did you kind of make of her performance against Badosa? Obviously, Badosa playing some really great tennis the last 1 year, has gotten her ranking back in the top 10, where she sort of belongs. And Coco, she seemed pretty upbeat, even after the loss, like pretty optimistic that she's on the right path. But this was a little bit of a regression, I thought, in terms of her quad.
It was. Yeah, I agree with you. But I also agree. I was glad that even if I didn't totally agree with her assessment, I felt like, good, it's no sense beating yourself up. Accept that you lost, accept that you got outplayed. She knows how good Badosa is, and just move on. And, some of the times, in the past, even at times last year, the losses against Navarro, I felt like she was really, you could feel her pain. And I don't think that's going to do her any good. That kind of tormenting. yourself and just beating yourself up. So that was a good reaction. But now, of course, she's got to go out and produce and start playing some good tennis. And she ended last year beautifully and won the year-end championships. She can recover from this. Had a nice comeback against Bencic. That was a tough match. Actually thought it might lead her to the title. Sometimes you win a match like that and can really pay dividends in the rounds ahead, but that just was not the case here. But I'm happy about Badosa. I don't know how you feel. I like her game. I like her attitude. She's got a lot of exuberance on the court, and unlike the other partner in her relationship, Stefanos Tsitsipas, who's really struggling and outside the top 10 now and going to have a hard time getting back in. She's now approaching, she's getting back to her old standards, and we should see her. I think she can get back to 3 or 4 in the world, somewhere in that range, 4 in the world maybe, the way she's playing. Very impressive.
Yeah, to me, she's playing better than she was when she was world number 2. Um,
Yeah, I agree.
and I'm also very impressed by the turnaround because I mean, a year ago, she wasn't sure if she was going to keep playing. She was getting injections in her
Right.
buke and she was in a horrible state. So to
True.
get back to the top 10 is, yeah, it's been impressive for sure. I was impressed with her, but um, I mean, on the women's side as well, we were looking at Naomi coming into the tournament because she had made the final in Auckland and she had a very nice one over Caldera Muhova in the second round, which had everyone feeling all in high spirits and positive about her trajectory. But then unfortunately, the same injury from Auckland, I think, struck her back in the end, and tough matchup against Bencic as well. But I feel for her because that's some bad luck.
Very bad luck. I mean, to have to default and retire in the final leading up to this, then this match here, she looked to me like she was capable. It was not ever going to be easy to beat Bencic, but I think it's one she could have won. Played so great against Bakova, and I feel like she's still on the right track. I just hope she'll get over that injury, and her attitude is good, and she good in the sense too that she's not going that easy on herself. Or I think her attitude is, look, I want to see some results here because I'm not hanging around to keep losing like this forever. That's not me, and I like that because that then forces her to demand more and get some of the big results she's looking for. And this was a very tough draw, let's face it. But with that kind of an injury, and who knows, it might not have mattered if she had a really good draw because she obviously it 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 cropped up before the tournament, cost her a final, and then maybe she never totally got over it. She looked okay in the first couple of rounds, but maybe she was never 100%. So I hope I hope the luck comes her way, Vansh, because to me, I still say that. I mean, look, it's hard to compare it to Keys because Keys was so such a pleasure to watch. But I would say a Naomi Osaka in full flight is about as much fun to watch as anyone in women's tennis, and we haven't been able to see that. And she had her close call against Iga in the French Open last year and match point, and probably should have won that match. But I hope the breaks will come her way because I feel like she has so much to offer when she's playing well, and I feel like she should be in the mix there, well inside the top 10. But she hasn't been able to get close. She really needs some big time results in the top tier events and to go deep into a slam. And I certainly hope that'll happen this year. I actually think it will. And she's got 3 more cracks. I don't expect necessarily a great French, but could have a good one. I do think she can do well at Wimbledon, and then particularly the Open with the right draw. That's where she can be at her best.
Yeah, for sure. I'm certainly, yeah. The U.S. Open is the one that I think everyone was circling for her last year when she came super close against Iga. It's funny how tennis works. I mean, Iga, this match against Keys was pretty similar in terms of the way the match was going, but here, Iga loses this one and wins that one. So it's kind of it's kind of funny sometimes how it works in tennis like that. But no, I mean, since you've watched a lot of tennis in your life and you've seen a lot of magnificent runs, like where does the Keys run stack up for you just in terms of like impressive, you know, 7 matches in a row like that? Because she knocked off Collins, she knocked off Rybakina as well in the fourth round. I mean, this was the quote unquote big three that everyone was sort of coining a year and a half, 18 months ago with Rybakina, Sabalenka, and Swiatek, and Keys just went through all of them, and she was even down a break in the second round against Rusa. I mean, Collins wasn't easy, so this was really, yeah, magnificent.
Yeah, listen, none of them were easy. all those three setters. But like you said, you look at Danielle, you look at Rybakina. I mean, these are all really good wins, and she had some bad sets. There's no doubt. She'd be the first to admit it. She played some sloppy sets in there, but never let it bother her, and just raised her level immediately each time. That's a string of very impressive wins. So I just don't think if you told me that she was going to have to beat that many really good players, I would have said that's just asking. That's just too tough, too much. But she obviously took it one at a time and relaxed and just dealt with it and never sold herself short. And it's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting. It's really great for tennis and women's tennis. And I mean, someone else I wanted to ask you about is Elena Rybakina because I'm a little bit worried about where she's going right now. Um, obviously the coaching situation with Goran and stuff, Volkov back in the picture, and you know, all of that plus a lot of the health stuff. Um, she just doesn't seem right mentally or physically, and we haven't been able to see the best version of herself in the biggest tournaments really since she made the final 2 years ago in Australia.
Yeah, listen, it's very worrisome because I mean, what she did with Goran was kind of irresponsible and disappointing to me because you can't ask him to come aboard and then sort of throw a curveball his way by asking your old coach to come back. And I don't know where that's going to end up, but I couldn't have instilled a lot of confidence in Goran that she had the belief in him as opposed to letting him do his job. And then just the way she's carrying herself on the court, a little bit negative, and she's certainly not serving the way she did. I thought when she was at her best, her serve was the best, and right now I don't believe that anymore. And yeah, I'm a little bit worried. I don't know where it's headed. You and I discussed this. She had some difficult moments in last year, and all those episodes of pulling out of tournaments either before or during. Yeah, I'm a bit I'm concerned. This was not it's no disgrace to lose in 3 sets to Maddie, but I it's just the way that she's handling herself on the court. She doesn't look that comfortable, and I mean, this is not the player I thought we'd be seeing at this stage. I'd hoped that maybe she was starting it. I thought it was a good sign that she wanted to bring Goran in. I thought, okay, great. You're finding another coach. You turn to a very good one who's done a fine job with Marin Cilic in the past and a great job with Novak for years. And that's a good move. He can really help you. And I think he still could. He could have. But now, of course, the trust seems to have been broken. And I must say, I don't know at what stage she's going to turn this around, Vanch. It seems to me it's unraveling a bit, and this might be another disappointing year. Hope she's healthy. I hope we get to see her play a pretty full schedule and be able to judge her on that basis, but I'm not at all confident that we will.
Yeah, I certainly have my doubts, especially after the way the last couple of years have gone, and what other possible emotional, physical abuse that might be happening, behind the scenes that we don't know about. So it's very worrisome. But I just hope, by Wimbledon or something, a lot of this can be sorted, and then we'll see the best version of her because she came pretty cool out here as well.
Yeah, that would be where you would think if she was going to turn it around, obviously, to try to get a second title and back in the semis last year. But yeah, I mean, if she's emotionally and mentally right, obviously physically she can do the job there. But I hope by then she's got things clear in her mind of what she wants to get out of this game and that she's enjoying herself again. And that'll be maybe a defining moment, what she does at Wimbledon. It's certainly in terms of whatever she's going to do this year. If we see an early round loss at Wimbledon, that's a very bad sign, and I hope we won't.
Yeah. Switching over to the men's side, I wanted to ask you about some of the younger players in the first week. Because, I mean, this tournament, I mean, we saw the next 10 finals happen, late December, and we saw a lot of great talent emerging from there, in Tien and Fonseca, especially, and Mickelson and Finns and all those great players, that are really challenging there, in the next wave of tennis. And hopefully we'll see them challenge Senator and Alcaraz soon. But, you saw the way, I wanted to ask you first about the Fonseca, beating Rublev in the first round and he lost to Sonego, which I think is no disgrace because Sonego ends up making the quarters, and it was a very tight match. So, but a lot of people are really high on him, and think he'll be in the top 10 by next year. And really high expectations for him. But you watch the game and you think, wow, a lot of it is already there, and he's super explosive. He reminds me a lot of Sinner when he was younger.
Yeah, I love his temperament. I love his style. I think in a way it was a good thing. He caused quite a buzz when he beat Rublev. I mean, now Rublev these days can lose to a lot of people, but it was the way he played in the tie breaks against Rublev that was so impressive. So he earned all of the plaudits that he got. But I thought in a strange way, it was a healthy thing for him at this age to take his lumps a bit too and lose to an informed Sonego, but in a five-setter in a well-played match and feel like, okay, he's still learning. I mean, it might have been a little too much too soon to make a big run there, but he certainly gave us evidence of what is to come and showed that that next gen victory was no fluke. And I love his forehand. I love his exuberance on the court. The lots of fist pumping and he carries himself well out there, very confident and very he's very mature. I think I don't see him losing his cool that much either. So I'm very encouraged by him. And I feel like he's going to have a very good year. I don't know exactly what his schedule is from here, but I expect him to make his mark in some more majors. And of course, playing a best of five. I mean, that's the far cry from playing 4-game sets at the next gen finals. So he still has to learn a little bit about that, but he will. And he's very determined. I think very professional. So I liked what I saw from him in Melbourne, regardless of the loss.
Yeah, I see him finishing somewhere between 20 and 50 in the world. I think he's that good already. So
I
I hope
agree.
put it
I
in
agree.
vote.
No, I think more the former than the latter. I expect him to be closer to 20 than to 50. And he gets his cracks and doesn't get injured. And he'll have a lot of good wins this year.
Yes. Um, another player as well is who Fonseca beat in the next 10 finals, which is Tien. Because yeah, I mean, what a magnificent win over Medvedev. I mean, he kind of put Medvedev at his own game, and did it in the fifth set tiebreak. And Medvedev, you thought was gonna win the fifth. When he came back from 2 sets to love down, and just the way that match finished as well, and just the craftiness of the lefty, and it just leaves you thinking like, wow, in a game of like, offense and power, like this guy is really in a different type of mode, and he's so crafty and creative with the way he constructs his points.
Yeah, a tricky left-hander. I think his serve's got to improve and it will. But he's got a lot of guile, as you say. And I was amazed by the Medvedev match because he's got a chance to have a set point to go up 2 sets to love and Daniel aces him out wide and he doesn't, he's got a chance to close it actually. I mean, he looked to me like nothing would disturb him. I mean, the way that he rebounded after it looked like he had the match in control and he could win in straight sets. And then Medvedev comes on strong. And when you go into the fifth set and you saw what he did in the fourth, and of course he said afterwards that he had to go to the bathroom. That I thought was really interesting because it looked on the court like he was having real issues and cramping or something was wrong. And then he clarified it first by what he said. And then you did see that I thought it lingered a bit into the fifth, though, that he was still struggling a bit, but then he got his bearing. He had the early break, he lost it. And then when Medvedev broke him and went up 6-5 in the fifth, to serve for the match would be at 15-love. And the way this kid played the rest of that game and the way he fought back in the ensuing tiebreak, it was just, I loved it. I loved it. I thought, and the way that he spoke after that match, Botch, the way that he talked about it, he wasn't lacking respect for Medvedev, but he spoke about it like he kind of expected that of himself. It was like, I can't believe I beat Daniel Medvedev. He's a Grand Slam champion. He's been in the finals here a couple of times. He didn't talk that way. It was more like, well, this is the kind of tennis I can produce. I'm reading between the lines here. I'm paraphrasing, but it was a very good, positive attitude that he believes in himself. And I felt like, I just thought the fifth set effort was amazing.
Well, absolutely, and he was caught without understanding him physically after that match, but he ends up winning his next match against Boutte, and you just felt like, again, him losing to Sonego, no disgrace in the second week of a major for the first time. So I mean, Yeah, he's gonna cause a lot of problems, I believe, against
Yeah,
Djokovic.
Sonego him to serve really well that day because Tien had been breaking everybody alive. He's got a great return, and he didn't get many chances against Sonego, but Sonego served exceptionally well. And you're right, Tien was pretty worn out by them, but it was good that he could get one more win. And I think he's opened up his own eyes now to what he can do. And Medvedev, I think, was pretty shattered, by the way, because he thought his experience was going to count more, and he certainly must have thought when they had that break at 5-all, I guess, right? Right before he got the break of serve to go up 6-5 in the fifth, there was something going on there. Yeah, and I think when he gets the break, I mean, I think he fully believed he was going to serve it out, and you kind of like his chances with his serve, in that situation. And Tien played just a tremendous game to break him back, especially being down 15-love. Usually those first couple of points against somebody that great, you don't win those first 2 points. Okay, he split them, but at 15-love, I would have put any amount of money on Daniel closing it out. So that was, to me, aside from Djokovic versus Alcaraz, that was the most enjoyable match of the tournament, the Tien match against Medvedev, for many, many reasons.
Yeah, totally agree. On the Medvedev side of things, where are you at with Daniil? Because he did go 5 in his first round against Samred, who's like
Yeah.
the top 400, and he came awfully close there. He was down break point in the fourth set, and it wasn't looking good basically. And I don't think his preparation was super ideal for this tournament as well. So I don't know, but it does the things that we have seen the last 1 year, we are seeing a little bit of a decline in him, physically and mentally, and the serve isn't as great as it was, and so I wonder what the bounce back for him will be like.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned. I mean, I guess the there was a lot going on at home and the birth of a second child, right? I mean, I understand there were circumstances that made him come over there later and things that might have contributed to this, but he's got to be a bit worried. The way things have gone and not having won a tournament since Rome in 23 and nothing last year. And he starts off this year with this. And now it's like, if he's not careful, he's going to be outside the top 10. I mean, he's got to really start putting some results on the board. Uh, yeah, I'm concerned. I don't know what, I don't, for instance, I don't expect a great French from him. Wimbledon, he's played well there the last couple of times. It's true, but uh, I don't know. It's going to be the next 6 months are going to tell us a lot. I think he's come off a disappointing year last year, and I thought there were the signs at times that he was serving as big as he used to, or as well as he used to, but it wasn't there. He didn't have the consistent big serving when he needed it, and finding those spots and serving those big aces, with the exception of that one against Tien. I mean, I'd be worried if I was in his camp, because I think that much disappointment, if you go back to the middle of 23, okay, he managed to get to the US Open final, great win over Carlos, one of those terrific performances again to beat Carlos and lose the final to Novak. Then this match here a year ago was crushing because for the second time in 3 years, he had a 2-set lead in the final. He'd done it against Rafa a couple of years before, and he loses in 5. So I think there's been a lot of carryover from that. Yeah, to get to the bottom. I mean, you kind of touched on it. I mean, if you're a Medvedev booster, if you're in his camp, and if you're looking for him to sort of finally get that second major, you have to be worried.
Yeah, certainly that's the direction we're headed right now with him. I think it's kind of twofold because the teenagers were the story of the first week, but it's also a little bit how like that group of players, who are the original next gen, let's say, apart from Zverev, they all have, yeah, I mean, they all have a lot of challenges ahead of them. I mean, players like Rublev, Tsitsipas losing to Mickelson. In turn, I was very impressed by Alex Mickelson to beat Tsitsipas and then beat Hachanov in straight sets, and just the tactics he had against Stefanos, which were pretty spot on. And you just feel like the gap of players who can do that to Steph these days has just gone up like crazy. And you still back him to do very well on clay, and he's probably a top 5 player on clay, but outside of that, it's getting really hard for him to make any kind of inroads and feel really relevant at the top of the game.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, just to touch on Tsitsipas first, he'll be putting a certain amount of pressure on himself, Vansh, when we get to the clay court circuit, because he knows what you're saying is true. He knows there's a growing legion of players on hard courts that are threatening to him in a way that maybe wasn't the case a couple of years ago. And so he knows that his best results by and large have been on the clay, not entirely. So I feel like that clay court circuit's going to be very important to him, because otherwise, how does he really make a move back to the top 10 unless he really performs well on the clay? And that means another great showing in Monte Carlo, maybe something in Rome, and a deep run at the French. But I don't know. It's hard to tell how badly he wants it right now, Vansh. And the question I also have about him is, why hasn't he found a Brad Gilbert type, somebody, if he seems to resolve things with his father, that his father's not going to have the same role, which is fine and I think positive. But then bring in somebody big, bring in somebody that really understands the game at the uppermost levels. And I just throw Brad's name out, but somebody like that can maybe can bring back that confidence and that ambition. Because right now, he doesn't seem that ambitious. That fierce competitor we saw from 18, mainly 18 through say 23, I'm not seeing it now. And even the way he reacted to this loss, I mean, he was pretty good. Another matter of being a good sport, but I didn't sense the urgency in the end, and he was seen to be able to accept the defeat against Mickelson. And yeah, I'm concerned about him too. I wouldn't have thought a while back that we'd be talking this way about both Daniel and Stepanos, but we all are. And yeah, his clay court campaign is going to be really important. As for Mickelson, I agree with your observations. I think he had a really good tournament, and obviously yeah, I mean those were good results. He got the kind of start to the season that he wanted, and I don't know. I don't want to make too big a ranking projection, but I feel like he's made a lot of progress in the last 6 months to a year, and he's grown up a lot. And strangely enough, to see his friend Tien play that well, I think that also will spur him on in a nice, healthy, competitive way. So I like where he's headed. I think he's a much better player than he was 12 months ago.
Yeah, totally agree. I love his backhand, how often he changes directions with it, and just what a great competitor he is. The serve is getting better, the forehand is getting better. He's racking up so much great experience, and yeah, I think that rivalry and friendship with Tien will really help them as well.
It
Um,
will. It will.
but I mean, just to get back to Steph, like I listened to his press conference, and my takeaway was that he's just lost right now. Like he's just confused and doesn't really have like he seems like a guy who has a lot of ideas, but he needs some kind of authoritative figure to come in so he can get himself organized in a way, and clear his head, because he was talking like, I feel like I'm a much better player than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
And
I heard that.
I hit with more topspin now, and I couldn't do that 5 years ago. And the power game is, the game is evolving, and the ball is hitting a lot harder, and some of that might be true, but I don't know. I just don't think the reason that he gave is why that's actually what's happening to him right now. So I feel like he's
Yeah,
not.
that's a muddled. The comments you mentioned are reflective of a man with a muddled mind, which is all the more reason why I would emphasize again the need to get somebody in there that really can spur him on and maybe tell him things he doesn't necessarily want to hear, but that will bring, because it's a critical phase of his career. And you shouldn't be, his age, you shouldn't be over the hill. You should still be playing your best tennis. So, yeah, the immediate period ahead is going to be very critical for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about him. I guess Taylor Fritz. I mean, in a way, I just have taken a lot of credit to Monfils. I feel like he played, the best match I've seen him play in a long, long time. Especially after he lost that first set. I was just so impressed by Monfils' level.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I can't say that I don't want to be too critical of Taylor either, because I don't think he believed. I think that Monfils could sustain that standard for 4 sets the way he did. And he served great. And yeah, it was a little disappointing, but it's like we need more evidence. I mean, we need to see more. He finished last year so well between the U.S. Open final and the year-end championships final. And okay, this is a bit of a setback, but you know how Taylor is. He just will get right back on the bicycle, as so to speak. And you'll see him. He'll play a lot of tournaments, and again, looking in terms of the majors, I don't. I he'd do okay at Roland Garros, but probably not great. But then Wimbledon and the Open, I could see some very good results from him. So it doesn't worry me. I think he probably will analyze that match and understand that Monfils played a whale of a match and not be too tough on himself. So yeah, step back because you want to live up to your number 4 seeding, and you want to, he would have liked to believe that he'd be in the semis playing Sinner, but it's okay. It's okay. I feel like he'll stay at it because I think he's got a lot of pride, and he thinks he earned that. He believes he's earned his place in the top 5 in the world, and he knows it's going to take some more big results, and there's going to be a lot of points to protect later in the year. And so I think these months are going to be interesting for him. What he can do, now through into the summer, and I feel like that loss. I'm not going to be too hard on him over the Monfils loss. One of the best matches Monfils has played in a long time, and he's played a lot of great tennis. Period. In the last year himself, the winner Carlos was so hard on himself about the Cincinnati loss, but Monfils played well there too, despite a subpar performance from Carlos, who was feeling it and smashing his racket and not himself mentally. It was still good stuff, and Monfils played well this whole tournament. I'm sorry he had to retire against Shelton. That I thought was unfortunate because but I guess he just been through too much rigor, having won a tournament before the Australian and then all these matches here, and it finally caught up with him. But I thought that was too bad because he played quite well in that match as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He really did. I guess he also had Jakub Menchik beating Casper Ruud in the second round, and that's one of those bad matchups for Ruud, and just Ruud never really registered in my mind as a big contender for this tournament. But with the clay court season coming up, he should be right in there. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, Casper can go through these phases sometimes. He can go through these lulls where he can take quite a few early round losses, and then all of a sudden he's at the ATP finals and in the semis.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. No, he's going to have those kinds of setbacks, and it can happen. And he didn't have a very long off season, but he'll bounce back. With Mensik, I think I'm very impressed with him. I'm expecting.
That's your prospect. So good.
Oh yeah, he's terrific, and it's just he's gonna have I expect him. I'd be surprised if we don't see him. I expect him actually somewhere between. I can see him ending the year between 15 and 20 in the world.
Yeah. I think that's a good prediction. And he's kind of in that Zverev Hurkacz type mold that he serves really big and he's very steady off the ground.
Yeah, he is. He's very good. Now that was a good performance, and Rude, that was a tough draw there for Casper, but I like what I'm seeing from Mensik. I think he's a fine player.
Yeah, absolutely. I was also impressed with Nishish Basavareddy. He's another guy that didn't mention who was also in the next gen finals. He played Djokovic in the first round, and that was a first rate match too. I mean, he really brought it for almost 2 sets, and then physically, I think he couldn't quite, in that environment, playing best of 5 against a player like that, it was too much for him. But I mean, Djokovic really had to work hard to get that win. So
Yeah, he did. And Novak was trying to get his teeth into the tournament. I thought that I thought he did a nice job, and I was worried about the cramping. I was worried that he wouldn't finish the match at one point, but he recovered well from that even, and kept up a pretty high standard through the third and fourth sets. So that was a good effort.
yeah, absolutely. And Djokovic, the first couple of rounds, you were feeling like, okay, he's working his way into this tournament, and now the real tests start to come against Mahac and Lehechka. And those performances were really impressive from Djokovic. The way he raised his level in both those matches against quality players who are playing some of the best tennis right now. So
Yeah, listen, those two performances, both straight set wins, followed by the comeback against Carlos. He was really getting there. It was just unfortunate the way things work, Bonch, because
yeah,
you're allowed to take the painkillers. He's allowed to take that during that match with Carlos, which I think obviously that then he was able to play pretty much pain free for a lot of the third and fourth sets. He said it started to come back a bit late in the fourth. But then, of course, he couldn't do that when he played Zverev. So it's sad to see him have to go out after a set, particularly given how he'd done in the previous three matches. And he did make it very clear. And this was not meant it as any disrespect towards Sasha because they're good friends.
Mm.
But he made it clear that he really liked his chances coming into that match. And I think it was a match that he would have won. And I think it's too bad for all of us that we didn't get to see this kind of revitalized Djokovic playing center in the final. Would have been really interesting, especially in light of the fact that the Carlos match gave him the confidence he needed, and which of course was preceded by the two matches you mentioned, which were very good performances. Because I think both Machac and Lehecka went out there thinking they might be able to do something. You know, they weren't cocky, they weren't figuring they were going to pull off a big upset, but they were going out there believing they had a shot, and he didn't give them much chance at all. So, yeah, I think overall it was a very good tournament for him. It's just going to be a question of how he recovers, Vansh, and from that tear. And I know he mentioned what he was going to play Doha. I guess that's uncertain right now. I can't see how he plays Doha, but hopefully he can get back not too long. I think what he really needs, Vansh, that's why it's too bad he get injured now, is he needs to start playing a little more regularly. And now this stops him from doing that. But there's no reason why especially when we get closer to maybe by Indian Wells and Miami, but if not, but certainly to be able to play a string of clay court tournaments and try and grab a title in there, get that 100th, but just get back into the rhythm. Because I think part of the reason he was well prepared. He lost that warm-up tournament, I know, in Brisbane. He lost to he lost that match to Riley, but that was just a tough. Now Riley had played an amazing match that night. I don't think Novak played too badly, but he got 3 matches there, and then he gets in, his 6 matches here, and it would have been nice to keep going, get back into the rhythm and the flow of match play. But I hope that once he has recovered from this, that's what he's able to do. Play a little bit more, a little tougher schedule, and just get matches in. And I still say he's going to get that 25th major somewhere along the line this year.
Yeah, I think I mean, after he lost the Shanghai final to a Sinner, I was like, look, this is a good move to cut off the season now, and just have a really long off season, give it all you got in Melbourne, bring on Andy Murray, get that spell of motivation and preparation, and give it a really good go. I'm just getting a little bit worried about the number of injuries, because RJ, he gets hurt midway through the tournament. That was, he was really rounding into form there, and that was, that was unfortunate. And then Wimbledon, he kind of is compromised, but he gets to the final. And then so I guess I'm just a little bit worried about like how frequent these injuries are becoming, and he's getting older, and it's just even harder. And it's also the draw as well. Like he's gonna have to go through Alcaraz, at least 2 of Alcaraz, Sinner, and Zverev to win a major in the end. He obviously still had a talent level. It's not a question of level. It's more just physically, can he actually do it anymore?
Yeah, I agree. Look, it's concerning, and he was honest about that. On the other hand, the positive side is that if you take it back to say a year ago, when he did hurt the knee at Roland Garros and had to pull out of the quarters, and he has the surgery for the meniscus, and the mere fact that he could get to the Wimbledon final so quickly, the comeback turnaround, then be strong enough physically to win the Olympics. And that was not easy to win a long 2 sets against Carlos in the final. And it was a pretty tough physical semi with Musetti. And all right, I didn't feel like physically maybe he was feeling great at the Open, but I didn't think he was feeling that badly either. I thought that was more emotional. And then, as you say, he goes over to Shanghai. He's in the final. He lost a good match to Sinner, tiebreak in the first set, and then shuts the season down. In a strange way, I look back on that, I think maybe could have been better off. Only he knows what his body was feeling like then. He did not wear the sleeve on his knee over there, which I thought was encouraging, that he didn't need to play with that anymore. But I wonder, looking back, if he might have benefited by playing in Paris indoor or in the year-end championships last year, could have gotten his ranking up higher, and there could have been some benefits, but only he knows how valuable that time was to stay off it. Bottom line is he can't afford, to get to your point, he can't afford too many. He doesn't want to. He really wants to avoid any more of these. He doesn't want to have to keep stopping and starting and dealing with new injuries and recovering from old ones. He's got to have a. He could use a good stretch here. Hopefully, gets through the season. You know, from he at least gets past the U.S. Open without any more injuries. Give himself a chance to play his best.
Yeah, but the one thing is clear that his level of ball striking and know-how and even the movement as well looks so much better than it did last year. So like, there's a lot of good things to be encouraged about if you're a Djokovic supporter. So
Yeah, I think so. And I think when he got into the flow, especially in the third and fourth sets of that Alcaraz match, when he was feeling good again, and he was no longer worried. He wasn't worried at that stage. He wasn't worried about the tear. He was just playing, and the ball striking, the movement, the point construction, the match playing acumen. It was all on display. And I think that there was a lot of talk, Vanch, about Alcaraz getting confused by Novak's injury, and was he skeptical or whatever was going on in Carlos's mind. He could tell by the third set that Novak was Novak, and so I don't think I think that, to me, there might have been some confusion in the second set when Novak went up 3-love and Carlos got it back on serve to 3-all, and then Novak broke at the end of the set. But there shouldn't have been any confusion about the third and fourth. At this stage, this was the best Novak we'd seen in a long, long time. And to me, he just outplayed him. I can't think of a match in the recent series with Novak and Carlos where he's out-hit him that badly. I felt like he was really getting the first strike in a lot of cases, that he was dictating a lot of rallies. At first, in the second set after the injury that occurred late in the first, it was more like he was just going to go for it a bit more and take his chances. But then it reached a point where he was more comfortable and he had more options. And I thought he felt like he could do anything he wanted on the court that night. And then the serving was remarkable, especially second serve. And then the reason he won almost 60% of his second serve points is he put so much pressure on Carlos with that slice in a serve wide in the deuce court. He had a lot on it, a little bit more mustard on it than usual. So there were so many good signs in that match. And the way he fended Carlos off at the end, that to me was actually the most impressive part of the match. Where middle of the third, late in the fourth, because middle of the third, he had the break at 4-2. And then Carlos broke back in the seventh game, but Novak got it right back and closed out the set 6-3. And then in the fourth, he's up 4-2 with that break point for 5-2. And you and I were texting about this, that what was actually a 35-stroke exchange. And he loses that grueling, tough rally, which he looked like he had won in a couple. Carlos defended beautifully in that point and finally coaxed an error up Novak's forehand and held his serve. And then the next game, Novak's got down a couple break points and got out of it and eventually won the set 6-4. But I felt like Carlos was playing really well by that stage of the match again, and Novak still had the upper hand. So I just felt like that to me was one of the highlights of the tournament. That, and of course, the Medvedev loss. And unfortunately, Vanch, we had disappointing semis and finals to me. I mean, if you look at, obviously we taught Novak having to retire after that first set against Zverev, and you could see he was not comfortable out there. I didn't think at any stage of that set that he looked comfortable. You just were hoping that maybe he was going to start to feel less pain, or he just get himself acclimated again. It just was not going to happen. And of course, he walks up and shakes hand after the set. Then you had the Ben Shelton serving for the first set against Sinner, a couple of set points. He'd already had the early break. He didn't serve it out, and then he lost the breaker, and there was no way he was going to win from there. So that was a bit of a letdown, because I think if Ben wins the first set, at least we've got a minimum 4-setter, and it would have been exciting and fun. I think Sinner still would have won, but would have been nice for Ben to put him down a set. And then the final, where Sasha, who seemingly was so rested, Bunch, the guy had lost a couple of sets in the tournament. That was all. And they both of the times when he lost a set to Humbert and Tommy Paul, he won pretty easy 4 sets, confident, commanding 4 sets. And yeah, he was a bit lucky against Tommy. That Tommy had set points in the first 2 sets, and he served for the first at 6-5. He served for the second set before Sasha completely outplayed him in tiebreaks. But be that as it may, he hadn't been through a lot of stress and strain physically, as he usually is at these majors. So I felt like we were going to see a much better performance in the final than we did. And I feel like I don't know if you were listening, Vansh, but at one stage, I mean, after the Novak match, and where he made that very nice comment on defending Novak to the crowd after they had booed him and leaving the court, and he talked about, he kind of told the crowd to have more respect. But then after that, when he made some kind of a reference to the match, and the gist of it was, well, I thought it was a pretty good set, but it's almost like what he was saying was, Novak was hurt, and I barely won that set. And
I picked up on that as well, and that's not giving himself enough credit, I think.
not giving himself enough credit, but also that revealed maybe some insecurity. Instead of just saying it was good tennis, I'm sorry for Novak, but I'm ready for the final. I can't wait to get out there in the final. And then, of course, you saw his reaction in the final. And again, he made that comment, made that reference to maybe I'm just not good enough. And then you had Sinner consoling him. And
Well, even in that career interview, career to step in is like, you're worth number 2, you've earned this.
yeah, right, exactly. He beat Carlos in the year-end championships. I mean, he's had some setbacks. All those losses to Fritz last year, I get it. And apparently that was something that he talked to Djokovic about. I think Djokovic talked about that too. But after he lost to Fritz at the Open, they were talking in Shanghai. Djokovic was trying to encourage him to believe in himself more. And sure, that's a concern when you lose to Taylor 4 times. That shouldn't happen, losing to him the 2 biggest tournaments. But be that as it may, all those wins, the French final, and here he was playing quite well in this tournament and seemingly ready. I thought maybe ready to put on a peak performance display in the final. I think like you, I was leaning towards Sinner winning the match in 5, but I never thought it would be straight. I never thought it would be straight. And I never would have believed, Box, that in 3 sets, no disrespect to Sinner, he's an underrated server. His serve has improved a lot. Like Novak, it reminds me of Novak in so many ways because it's also how well he backs up the serve. But to not have a break point in 3 sets. And Sasha, not saying he's the best returner in the game, but he's far from the worst. And he's got all that wingspan. And usually he puts guys under a certain amount of pressure on their serves. But that made it so difficult for him to operate like that when he's not getting any opportunities. Now, he had a couple of chances there in a sense at 4-5. He's got Sinner serving at 4-5, love 30, and then again at 5-6, 30 all. They had that great point and where he'd drawn Sasha in, and then Sasha scampered back to the baseline, put up the lob, got back in the point, came up to the net again, and then couldn't put the volleys away when he came back up. That would have given him a break point.
That point reminded me a little bit of the Medvedev Tien. They both had backhand volleys after a really great point,
Yeah, right.
and they didn't do quite enough with it.
No. Well, the first volley wasn't that great either down the line, but then the second one where he just didn't, he didn't knife it and he didn't angle it enough. He didn't do either. And it was a very easy backhand pass for Jannik up the line for the winner.
Yeah.
So that was a killer point because it could have given him a set point. And obviously he had to win that second set. Whether he would have won the match, who knows?
So he started the tiebreak out really well, and he went up 2-1. And I was like, okay, I'm finally seeing a little bit more, authoritative Carlos movement on the burst line. And then he gives it a roll with 2-1 forced errors on the forehand.
Yeah, exactly. The 2-1 point, he hit the forehand inside in just a little long, a bit unlucky. He was hit pretty cleanly and just a few inches long. But again, you have to make something of that. You got the mini break. And usually the great servers in that situation, in the blink of an eye, they've gone from 2-1 to 4-1, and the breaker's just about over. And he didn't win either point.
His assessment, sorry to interrupt, his assessment after the match was like, Sinner does everything better than me. He serves better than me, or no, he hits his forehand better than me, backhand better than me, moves better, always he's listed everything. And then he said, I serve better than him. And that way didn't really treat him this match either,
No, it wasn't. I was surprised he said that because, yeah, it wasn't true. He lost his serve twice. He didn't serve that great. I still have an issue, Barge, with Sasha's thinking, and I guess his dad's and everybody around him too.
Yeah.
He serves big. You constantly see 218K, 214K. We're looking in the 130s MPH all the time. The speed is there. And then then there are stages where he goes for that slice serve wide in the deuce court, and with his height and his accuracy on that serve, he can serve a lot of aces. But I don't feel like he goes for enough of them. And this idea that he was a little under 70%, I guess, in this match. But most matches, yeah, 68. But normally he can even be higher than that. But I wouldn't mind seeing him at 58 to 60 and serving more closer to the lines and winning at where there's absolutely almost no chance that serve comes back. And
It's also
that's
quite
the
predictable.
guy that serves his
Sinner could stand deep on the first serve return, and Zverev wasn't hitting it out wide, like enough.
not enough, not nearly enough.
Well,
So I wish they would rethink that. I think he could exploit his serve better than he does. It seems crazy to say that given the percentages and the numbers, but I'm convinced he could do it and that it would make life a lot easier for him in matches like this. But look, he was distraught. I think the fact that that Sinner himself consoled him, that Djokovic again put something out on social media about believing in himself. He knows those guys are genuinely they mean it. They believe it. But it's going to be up to him, Vanch. He's got to be the one that makes up his own mind now that he's good enough to do this. And this was his third crack. And you and I remember so well the 2020. That's the one that will always haunt him, I think, because you're 2 sets to 11 and break up on team. You serve for the match in the fifth set. You're 6-all in the fifth set tie break, and you lose. And no disgrace. It's Dominic Thiem, who was a great competitor and worthy of the prize himself. But then he follows with Carlos at the French final last year, and he's 2 sets to 1. He makes the big comeback from 5-2 down in the third to win the third set, go out 2 sets to 1. He's looking up at his father like, here we go. And yet the last 2 sets were very disappointing. So I feel like, and no disrespect to Carlos, who played very well the last 2 sets, but Sasha didn't keep up his end of the bargain. So there's that one, and then now this, where, aside from threatening to win the second set, he's just completely outplayed. And I feel like it's going to be interesting, to see where he goes from here. Does he finally get a major? I don't think it's going to get a lot easier. I mean, he's not in a Medvedev plight. He's not in a Tsitsipas plight. He's going to still keep winning tons of matches and a few tournaments. And I suspect, whether he stays at 2 in the world, I don't know. I don't think that's going to last. I think Carlos will put some results on the board and pass him. But he's certainly going to stay up in the upper regions of the top 4 or 5. And it's hard to imagine he takes much of a fall from there. But the question is, when more opportunities present themselves, and if we see him back in the semis of Roland Garros in a big match, or he manages to get back to the final, what happens then? And I feel like this is the most, I don't want to say despondent, but close to despondent that I've seen him. He's a guy that I think up until now has believed in himself. But boy, he took this loss very hard, and he couldn't hide it on the court at all. It was so apparent during the presentation.
yeah, we've seen his way of sometimes rationalizing or like focusing on one moment of a match too much and then making that like kind of the reason. But you can see he's a little bit insecure because he talks a lot about that. For instance, I've seen him bring up that point at the French Open a lot. Where he that 9 call where he could have been it could
It's
score in the fifth.
right. In the
Well, as there was that incident in Shanghai where he was talking with the umpires and he was like he's lost slam finals because of umpires and you
Yeah.
know the stuff like that. Or even in this match, it's like, yeah, he's world number 2. He's won that much. He's won 7 1000s and 2 year-end finals, and he's won Olympic
Yeah,
gold.
right.
And I don't know, he just can't seem to bring it on the really, really big occasions in the semis and finals now. And it's a lot of
That's such a good point. He does get hung up about certain things, and he was all uptight about it, waiting for his rackets to come back here during this match. And he was looking to his camp and wondering where the rackets were. And
And also the effort in the third set was a little bit disappointing. I understand he's down 2 sets and it's tough, but I still felt like he could make the match physical, and that should have been his goal throughout. And I just didn't feel like he played it the right way. So
didn't play the right way at all. And maybe he was a bit haunted by the net cord winner from Sinner, the 4-all point in the breaker. Bad luck, but he'd already kind of put himself in that position by what you and I were alluding to earlier when he's up 2-1 with the mini break and he doesn't make anything of it. So, yeah, you're right. I do think there, obviously, that's one of the great qualities in the likes of Djokovic or Alcaraz or Sinner. And, the great players put those disappointments and difficulties behind them in a hurry. And you're not going to see them get plagued by that. But to this stage of his career, Zverev does, and it's surprising to me, given the amount of experience he's got right now, that he hasn't conquered that, broken that bad habit.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I was very surprised that it was straight sets because the one thing like Sinner is so complete, he's reached like a Djokovic level of completeness almost.
Yeah,
In terms of like it's hard to say like what actually works against Jannik right now because he's just kind of mastered it at least on hard courts.
he has.
But
Yeah,
but the one thing is like he's never won a match over 4 hours in his career. He doesn't have a great 5 set record, but most of the guys aren't, good enough right now to really push him even beyond the third hour. So it kind of feels like that part of it is being untested. Like I didn't feel like Sinner played a good match, but I didn't feel like he had to do anything extraordinary to win this final. Or there's several more gears that Yannick has that he can go to, and he didn't need to go into any of them.
couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. That's what was the most disappointing part of it. And I think if you ask Sinner, if we were having an off the record conversation with him right now, he'd completely agree that he was not made to dig deep. He just was being asked to play well. That's not how it should be in a major final. And you're right about Zverev. He kind of got resigned to this in the third set instead of saying, "I'm going to dig in. I'm gonna do everything I can to win this set. I'm gonna keep him out here, and I'm gonna remind him that this is best of 5, and I'm not gone yet." And you didn't sense any of that from him. And came down to the one break in the third, and he was gone. And that was too bad because I still don't think it should. At his level, you can't allow that to happen. And there's no way that you put Carlos or Novak or Jannik in that same position. They're going to be fighting you tooth and nail in the third set and saying, I'm not going to make it easy for you to finish me off. I'm still out here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Carlos did it against Zverev last year in the third set. He someone salvaged it. He did it against him in Roland Garros, and
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. The Carlos example, that's right. Even the one here in Australia where he's playing so bad, but is he salvaged the third set? He could so easily been gone against Sasha at straight. And he really made him work hard to finish off that win. And the fourth set was hard fought. And yeah, that's the way it should be.
yeah,
That you don't give in at all in a third set like that. And Sasha did in a way. And I think that was also contributing to his mood afterwards. I think he was disappointed in himself.
yeah. In some ways, it might have been better for him to get a few more. I don't know, a few more minutes in the semi, but it's obviously that's not how it works, and it's
Yeah, absolutely.
it's tough to contend with that. I mean, obviously the forehand stats weren't great for him. I mean, he made like 3 winners and like double digit unforced errors, but I feel like the backhand was off as well, like not at all anywhere near his normal.
Was way off. Yeah, by his standards, way off. But yeah, he can't afford for that to happen in a match of this consequence. And he's always going to have issues up the forehand, but that backhand is so tried and true that it's shocking when it does go a little bit off like that.
I do have to give Sinner full marks for that set point that he played in the second set because to hit a forehand winner off of that ball was pretty impressive because he hit it pretty close to the line and normally you would have seen it maybe like a little bit more calculated with it, like, working the point a little bit more and then pulling the trigger, but he felt so comfortable at that stage that he could actually pull that trigger and, you know,
Yeah, it was a beauty, straight down the line. And when it left his racket, I thought it was going to go wide.
Headed to, yeah.
That was not the case at all. Yeah, it was a great shot. Look, at that point, he could taste it, and he was glad to be in front and glad to be at set point. And yeah, that's the mark of a champion. That was impressive. And the way he served out the first set was, the way he closed out the match was, that was a beautiful match point with the drop shot setting up the backhand pass. There's a lot to commend him for. But the bottom line is still what you said. He didn't have to play a great match. He had to play a very good match. That's what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, as for the Shelton match, I'm glad you mentioned that because I like the way Shelton approached the match afterwards. He was very disappointed, and I love that. He could have easily said, "Oh, it was a great run to the semis." like, oh, I've done well. There'll be other chances for me, but he knew that was a chance for him in the first set that he didn't close that one out, and he was yeah, he was pretty frustrated that he didn't serve better, and I feel like Shelton grown a lot this tournament as well. To get to the semis the way he did,
He
and
did. He
yeah,
did. I like the attitude too. I like the honesty. He said coming into the final, Vanch, that he felt like in all but only one match he felt he'd served well. And I don't understand why this would happen match after match after match. I also don't get why a guy that I know he's trying to figure things out on his serve, and he's not going to serve 142 every point.
no,
On the other hand, I don't think we see enough of those. I don't think we see enough of those close to the lines. I'd like to believe this is a guy that I don't care who he's serving for the set against, whether it's Sinner or Djokovic or Alcaraz, but with that lefty serve, I'd like to feel like he's confident that he's going to serve out a set. And that was his second break of the set. And he lost the serve again. I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement there in the kind of planning and execution on the serve between, the wide slices and the kickers and the bombs. And I feel like he should be holding more easily than he does, in my view. And I don't mean that just in the Sinner match, but period. And I'll be interested to see if he and his father address that. And I know he's spoken in the past much about worried about his arm. And, if he goes for too many of the big ones, he's going to hurt his arm. But I've never heard I don't hear that kind of talk from, other big servers through the years. I've never heard them say that. I think they felt like they could come at you with their biggest serves and not be worried about their arm. Feel like they could keep serving that way as long as they wanted. And yes, variety is important and you can't be too predictable, but I don't know. I definitely I know Brad Gilbert has talked a lot about this, but I'm with him on this. I want to see the big heat from him more, but also close to the lines where nobody's going to be able to guess it that easily, and they're going to have a heck of a time getting it back into play.
yeah, and especially on the ad side as a lefty, I don't feel like he uses that slice wide enough. Like I feel like that's if he can develop that serve, oh my goodness, it's gonna be if he just develops that one, I feel like it'll be big trouble for so many guys because right now he doesn't hit that one as well. He can hit it fast, he can hit it body, he can hit it hard, but I feel like yeah, if he can be a little more strategic about it, because we saw him play a little bit better off the ground this tournament. I like the way he was mixing in the slice. The backhand looked a little bit stronger to me. It seems like the rest of his game is coming together slowly, but the serve
I
was the
agree with
main
you.
pillar, and so that has to be shored up a bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, that slice wide, he's got to be able to make it go a little heavier slice short and wide and pull the guy way off the court. And he'll get some aces out of that too. That one should be better for sure. Ground game coming along, as you say. I'm still a little worried sometimes about the forehand. I feel like
That's the shot that goes awry.
it goes.
That's what cost him the set. Those down the line forehand triggers that he tried to pull, and
Yeah, that's right. It did. And I think that, but again, the willingness to work, the attitude, the competitiveness.
oh,
Yeah, he wasn't satisfied at all, and that was a great sign because he could have been very pleased by making the semis, and no matter what happens against Sinner, he'll be proud of himself. But he was not. He wasn't content, and I think he also is honest about that he needs a lot to keep working hard on his game. And I hope his dad will that they'll kind of hone in on this now because I'd like to see him be able to end this year in the top 10 in the world. I mean, he's good enough to do that, to be in the bottom of the top 10 of the world, especially having started the year off with a result like this.
yeah, absolutely. And his slam record is so far much better than his best of three record, and hopefully, we see that even out a little bit more. But it's good that he's bringing it on the best stages, and two slam semis already in 18 months, and you don't feel like he served his best this tournament. So yeah, you have to feel good about it. In some ways, he was actually closer to beating Sinner than Zverev was, which yeah, I mean, is a
True.
right
It's
for Sasha. But
couple of set point, broke him a couple of times and be a couple of set points to go up one set to win that first set. So yes, he was.
yeah, and of course, the main scare for Sinner came in the third set against Rune, where he was really struggling with the heat and the cramping, and Sinner had those break points, and Rune had those break points in the third set in two different games. Yeah, so 50-30 at 1-0, and then the next service.
1-all, 2-all. Yep. Back to back games. That was a dangerous period for Sinner. And when they had the camera on him at the changeover, Vanch, he looked very wobbly. He looked dizzy. he looked dizzy, and it was a good thing that they got him to the locker room and gave him whatever they needed to do. The trainers, the doctor, because he didn't look well at all. I think what helped him was the security that gave him, that they'd given him something that could stabilize him, and the fact that he knew that Holger had been through a couple of 5-setters and a tough 4-setter, and Holger was showing his own signs of some kind of an issue with his knee. And I think Sinner was aware of that, which was a little bit reassuring that he could just find a certain level again. He could still get out of this match. But it was a little bit scary to see him, watching him at that stage of the match. He didn't look well. And
Yeah, he was like shaking, and
yeah, he was.
Djokovic at the ATP finals in 2022 when the changeover, and
Yeah, that was very strange. But fortunately, there was no sign of it again. He did seem to be grabbing his lower back and hip. I don't know. Something was going on in the final. I don't know whether he had some kind of hamstring problem. He had some minor issues, nothing serious. But that's why, all the more reason why Zverev should have kept him out there.
yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean that was the moment really for Sinner, because aside from that, I mean he was in no real jeopardy really the next.
Well, also, yeah, no jeopardy, and he loves to play de Minaur. I feel like he could put blindfolders on and beat Alex in straight sets. That matchup is just so perfect for him. And he felt like he wasn't even gonna panic. He wasn't gonna panic if Ben won that first set. He still felt comfortable that over best of 5, he was gonna win that match. So he all along, Vansh, there was no doubt that that draw was better for him. He knew that Novak and Carlos on the other side, he saw all the way it stacked up, and it was always favorable to him. And and then he rose to the occasion. And then now I think the most interesting thing about Sinner for the rest of this year, Vanch, is how does he make inroads on Carlos? Or does that losing streak continue? I can't believe that he's not going to at least hold his own with Carlos this year. I'm not saying that Carlos should never beat him, because that's not true either. But I'd like to believe he's at least going to be capable of swapping matches with Carlos, of playing him on an even basis.
Yeah, well, I'd like to see Carlos get a little more consistent so we can see that matchup more often.
Yeah, of course.
Don't you think? I mean,
I'm just assuming we will see it. We'll see it. You're right. Carlos has to get more consistent, and that's part of the deal. But that was the only odd thing about last year. You could look at Sinner's record, was so solid and spectacular at the same time, and he wins 2 majors just like Carlos wins 2 majors. And the only negative was the 3 losses to Carlos.
yeah,
Otherwise, he was great.
to me, there's really only two guys that can challenge Sinner, and that's Alcaraz and Djokovic. And
Yes.
it depends on his injuries and age, health, and for Alcaraz, it's about the consistency. But the thing is, with Carlos, I liked what I saw in the first 4 matches, in the sense, he's tweaked the serve. It looks a little
Right.
more fluid. The backhand technique, he's experimented with it a little bit. I think that one's still like kind of in flow, but he's added more power to his racket. Like, he's made those changes, and for the first 4 rounds, he didn't waste a ton of energy. He only dropped that one set against Borges. So coming into it, I was I kind of figured that Djokovic would get off to the better start, because he's been playing more. He played all of his matches at night. He's more familiar with that sitting in Rod Laver. And Alcaraz, he only played once, and that time, the time throughout the whole event, although not on Rod Laver Arena. But just the way that he won that first set in the match from 2-love down, and he kind of settled into it. And once Novak got hurt, you're kind of thinking that, yes, I agree with you completely about sets 3 and 4 from Djokovic. I mean, that was just phenomenal what he did. Like 6 on 4 stairs in 2 sets, just crazy. And the movement was back. He was so hard to hit through in those night conditions. And the serve and return battle, he completely dominated Carlos, like 58% second serve points, won
Yeah.
3%. That was the big takeaway. But in turn, I do feel like, Carlos in the second set, he had a small window there where, where Djokovic was really struggling, and I feel like he lost his venom from the baseline. Do you agree with that?
I do, briefly, but I also think, yeah, I do. I do. But having said that, Novak got the little cushion right off the bat. Maybe Carlos was trying to figure things out, and Novak is 3-love. But before you know it, Carlos is 3-all. So it was an interesting set, because Djokovic then held a couple more times, then jumped on him in the last game. And I thought maybe that was the biggest game of the match in a lot of ways, when Novak broke and won the second set to get back to 1-set all. Yeah, I agree. Carlos got a bit confused in that period, but I didn't feel that that lasted that long. I felt like Djokovic was just too good in the third and fourth. But you're right. There was a little bit of trying to figure things out and trying to gauge Djokovic.
Yeah, I think he got a little tentative because he felt like Djokovic is, struggling here. So let me just make as many balls and let's
Yeah,
move on,
he needed to be more aggressive in that phase. He was trying too much to hit loopers and keep them in longer rides, and that was not to his own benefit. Uh, but that's why it was so much fun to see the match, the tennis that unfolded after that, especially in the fourth set, because now he knew, and I thought the tennis really sparkled in the fourth. I thought they both played some great tennis in the fourth, and Novak just played extremely well both third and fourth.
Yeah, and it was so impressive from Djokovic because I didn't feel like he was serving his very best in the fourth. Carlos had looks in every service game almost
Yeah,
that Djokovic played, and there was the 15-40 break points that Carlos had,
yeah,
and he hits that forehand shank. But I think like the next point was super impressive from Djokovic, where he saves it with a serve and volley, and even the last game Carlos was right in there. So I felt like again his best chance was get it to five, and then let's see how Djokovic is looking then.
yeah. It's true, but I think
Yeah,
Novak played those big points really well,
he did, yeah.
and I think that part of the reason why he was having a harder time holding his percentages went down in the fourth.
Mm.
And so that even as good as Novak's second serve was, he was just letting Carlos get a look at too many second serves. But again, there were just what I loved about it from Djokovic's standpoint was there didn't seem to be any hesitation. He was not doubting himself at all in the fourth. It didn't matter that he's 4-2 with a break point for 5-2, and Carlos wins the marathon rally. And suddenly, instead of 5-2, it's 4-3, and you're down those break points. But he stayed on task. He didn't get negative. He didn't get agitated with himself, and he did a terrific job of closing out the match.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing for Carlos is the I was gonna say something about like in the second set, he has the 4-all love 50. He has a second serve and he kind of does a saber on that point. And
Yes.
he's so talented. He can pull this shot off like sometimes, but
Yeah.
it's just I feel like again sometimes he goes for the spectacular when he needs to be like more focused and buckle down and you know that I don't feel like that was the right time to play that shot. And maybe
No, probably not.
article, but I
But
just
then the next game, he never had a chance. I mean, Joe just got a like love break. You're right. That was not the right shot at the right time. It wasn't. There's always going to be that impulse
yeah.
to go for the spectacular over the ordinary. But I did feel like you alluded to the other matches. Felt like throughout the tournament there was a much more bread and butter from him. I kind of liked the way he was playing most of those matches, aside from the one set that he lost. I mean, I thought in most that he was playing much more to the percentages. He wasn't trying to be a splashy in most of those matches, which I liked, and he has to keep working on that, keep forcing himself to do what's going to work to win, and not be so consumed by pleasing the crowd.
Yeah. I felt like that as well. No, I think he's still gonna have a really great year. And I still think Indian Wells is coming up, and the clay court swing, and can be healthy. Like last year, he missed most of the clay court swing with an arm problem, and it's gonna be some pressure on him as well to win Roland Garros and you know
Yeah.
Wimbledon again. And Sinner is so good on hard courts, so yeah,
Well, it's interesting, Carlos winning the 22 U.S. Open, but then loses to Medvedev in defending. But he did do a nice job, obviously, at Wimbledon to defend his title there. He's fully capable of defending these majors. So I don't think he'll get into a panic mode about defending Roland Garros. But the interesting thing will be just how well is he playing throughout the tournament? Does he beat Sinner? Does he play Novak? There's so many interesting questions that will be answered there. And that's going to be a fun tournament, actually, all around, between Carlos going back to defend and Novak it was played so well there in recent years, and winning it, of course, in 21 and 23, and then will Sasha get back in the mix again? And I think it's going to be a great French, to tell you the truth.
yeah. I can't wait for it. I mean, since we're talking a lot about spot serving, I forgot to mention Djokovic's ability on the second serve in the match against Carlos, the way he was his second serve strategy was quite interesting because whenever he saw Carlos hugging the baseline, he would go really big on the second serve.
Oh, absolutely.
He would.
Big, but he's got that margin because of the slice. He's confident that going after the slice in the deuce court, he's not going to double fault very often. And you're right, but he was very comfortable going bigger, and he really made Carlos pay a price for that, which is interesting, Vaj, because it was exact.
Turn, don't you feel like Carlos should have moved back and maybe he should have he should have played around with it a bit more? I feel like the last couple of times he's played Djokovic, even though they've been good matches, I just feel like the return has been the confounding piece for him, and it's not like that
It
against
has, but the difference was in Paris at the Olympics, he was way back on the
It was
return.
way back, yeah. And here he was like hugging the base.
Here he was too far in. Now that's the kind of thing that I'm puzzled by from the standpoint of his relationship with Ferrero, and why is Ferrero not getting him to do that, especially here.
Yeah.
The Olympics is different. I don't know what the rules were there, whether he could have, how much he could have said to him in Roland Garros at the Olympics. But here, I would have thought that would have been just the kind of thing he was yelling at him, that he'd be yelling at him about moving. Now, whether we'll never know if it would have worked, but it was surprising to see him so committed to doing one thing, and not adjusting the return position.
Yeah, because I mean, and then on his own second serve as well, he was hitting those kickers, but they were bouncing right in Djokovic's strike zone, and he was getting the
Yeah.
first strike, and he made him pay really. So
Yeah, he made him
yeah,
pay. That was interesting because there are times in the past that Novak, especially in the ad court, that's been the toughest play for him, is dealing with Carlos's kick in the ad court, but not in this match. Not in this match at all.
yeah, that was the case when they played in Cincy and even at the Olympics. I mean,
Yeah,
that serve was causing Djokovic a lot of problems, but
yeah. It's from the very first time they played in Madrid in 22. It was giving him trouble, but I must say, I thought his returning in this one was really quite good.
it was. Yeah,
It's the most aggressive returning I've seen from him against Carlos.
yeah, absolutely for sure. So yeah, I mean that rivalry. Hopefully, we keep getting more matches between them. I mean, they've already played 8 times, and Djokovic just won all 3 of their matches on hard courts. Uh,
Right, right.
it's pretty big, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty excited about the French. I mean, there's a long way to go until then, but maybe we'll learn more, and we'll see what happens with the center case as well with WADA, and how that goes at the end of April because that could change the whole landscape of men's tennis as well.
Yeah, I don't know what your prediction is. I'm worried about it. I feel like, wait a minute, there's such a disparity between ITIA. I mean, the original punishment being taking away the points at Indian Wells and the prize money, to WADA saying this should be a year to 2 year suspension, which is it's a big difference. It's be one thing if they said we think this should be 3 months, but what they're asking for is so big. I'm worried, and I hope I'm wrong. I don't want the decision to be some compromise where he gets 3 to 6 months. To me, he's already had to live with this. By the time they finally make a decision, and what's this? How's that going to unfold, Vance? Will we hear immediately after
I
within a
don't
couple
know.
of
I don't
days?
know, but I know that the case is behind closed doors and it's on April 16th to the 18th. And
Right, right. Well, I
I'm
hope we
only,
hear quickly, but my worry is I don't want to see some kind of compromise decision, considering what he's been through,
yeah,
considering that
even a
this
3 month
was
ban would be brutal because that would mean missing, that could be potentially missing all the majors this year.
could be missing all the majors, but look what he's had to do. I mean, he's known about it since not long after Indian Wells last year. And, so it's been on his mind. And then he was having to try to figure out what happened. And then he told them what happened. And the decision is made, and then it's appealed. But for this to drag on, when you consider that they didn't announce it until right before the US Open, and then the appeal is what, a month after the Open or whatever it was from WADA, and then we don't get this trial until the mid-April. That's way too long. I mean, is there going to be? I don't think they're going to know anything more, right, Vanch? It's my understanding that it's just a matter of evaluating the evidence and deciding on what the proper punishment is.
Yeah. And basically, how much of a punishment do we want to say for the fault of his team, rather than him?
Right,
No,
right.
I don't know.
But anyway, I hope for the sake of the game and for him, because my belief is that he's paid enough of a price and received enough of a punishment to lose those points and prize money last year, that here's the guy who now is the preeminent player in the sport, and you don't want to see his year disrupted badly or perhaps ruined, by a suspension.
Yeah, I echo the same thing because I mean, you don't want to see, yeah, you just don't want to see the field without center in the next, however long, because you just want to keep seeing those great matches at the top. And yeah, I mean, there would be a void for sure. So, yeah, couldn't agree more. But Steve, thanks as always for your time. I mean, we kind of got ourselves in so many different type of discussion. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I always enjoy it, Bunch. It's great. We get more and more conversational with these podcasts, which I think is better. I hope the listeners would agree that it's better for them. They want to hear both of us, and they want to know when we agree and disagree. But I thought this was a lot of fun tonight.
Yeah, same here. Can't wait for after Roland Garros.
Yeah, same here, Bunch. Look forward to it.